Welcome to Havana Revealed, a conversation with Professor Marilys Nepomechie, brought to you by Architectural Adventures. This webinar will provide you with a detailed overview of the Architectural Adventures trip to Havana, occurring from March 10th through the 15th, 2017. Before we get started with our conversation with Marilys, I wanted to provide you a little bit of information regarding Architectural Adventures. Architectural Adventures is the official travel program of the American Institute of Architects. We work with tour operators to provide travelers with expert-led tours that focus on the architecture, culture, and history of premier destinations. We do specialize in small group travel that will provide you with an immersive educational experience. Our approach to travel provides you with an opportunity to explore the world's architecture with like-minded individuals. You'll receive educational guidance and commentary from pre-selected architectural experts, and you'll have an opportunity to participate in special excursions, exclusive behind-the-scenes access, and you'll get insider knowledge to popular sites as well as lesser-known architecture. The architectural expert for the Havana trip is Marilys Nepomechie, FAIA. Marilys is the Associate Dean for Strategic Initiatives and Professor of Architecture at Florida International University. Marilys, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure, I'd be glad to. Hello, everyone. My name is Marilys Nepomechie. I was born in Cuba, in Havana, as a matter of fact. I left the island with my family as a young child. I'm an architect, as you heard in the introduction, as well as a professor of architecture in Miami, Florida. My work as a designer and as a researcher focuses on issues of affordable housing and coastal urban resilience in the tropics and subtropics, and that includes both Cuba and the place where I live, here in Miami. I should say that for a number of years I've taught courses on the history of urban development in Havana, and I've curated 2 exhibitions on the subject, one in the Netherlands at the International Architecture Biennale in Rotterdam, and one here in Miami at the Frost Museum of Art. I am very much looking forward to traveling with all of you next spring.
Thank you so much, Marilys, and also thank you for taking the time today to speak to us about this exciting itinerary.
I'm looking forward to it.
So I will go ahead and get started with day 1. So on this day, once travelers arrive in Havana, we will take an orientation drive around the city, and we'll be stopping at the Plaza de la Revolución, the city's largest square. What can you tell us about the square? What's the significance of the square, and what can travelers expect to see here?
Well, the Plaza de la Revolución, which was originally named the Plaza Cívica, which means the Civic Plaza, was renamed after Castro's revolution in 1959. It's not only a prominent space in the city, but it's also the name of the district that the plaza occupies. It's a district that was created in the years after the expansion of the city beyond the colonial walls. And it's it includes one of the neighborhoods that we're going to visit, named El Vedado, which means the forbidden. The plaza is probably one of the largest civic squares anywhere in the world. It's said to hold nearly 1 million people. There have been many political rallies here, not only Castro, who has addressed his country there in the years since his revolution, but when Pope John Paul II and Pope Francis visited, both of them held large masses here. And the monument itself is a memorial to a Cuban patriot, José Martí. The tower has an elevator. You can actually go up to the top, although I'm not sure that that's part of the itinerary. Construction of the square began during the presidency of Batista, who was in charge when Castro took over the nation. And the idea was born of a design competition in the 1940s. It took nearly 20 years to complete the project. There are a number of really important buildings around the plaza. The National Library can be seen from there. A number of government ministries and cultural institutions are located in and around the plaza as well. The Palace of the Revolution, which is the seat of Cuban government and the Communist Party, is right there. And the Ministries of the Interior and Communications are across the street. There are two monuments there that you've probably seen photographed many times, and they are of Che Guevara and Camilo Cienfuegos.
Amazing, Marilys, and this image really shows the scale. If you see the individuals in this photo at the bottom of your screen, really incredible structure.
The statue itself is about 60 feet tall, and the tower much taller.
Wonderful. Well, on day 2, our group will be exploring Old Havana. On this day, we're going to have an architectural expert from the Old Havana office of the city historian, and they're going to speak with us about the city's architectural history and urban layout. We'll also take a guided walking tour through Old Havana. So tell us a little bit about the architecture of Old Havana. What can travelers expect to see on this day?
Okay, well, we just had Columbus Day, which I guess is timely because in October of 1492, as we understand it, Christopher Columbus discovered America. According to Cuban legend, maybe larger legend, Columbus remarked that Cuba was the loveliest land ever beheld by human eyes. Havana's always been very proud of that. The city was the seat of Spanish colonial government in the New World for more than 400 years. It was held by Spain until independence at the end of the 19th century. And the city was originally planned and it was built according to the law of the Indies. It was designed as essentially a major European city in the Americas. Huge riches were brought into and through Havana from the New World to the Old One, and as a result, the city is one of the most heavily fortified in the Americas, and we'll be able to see some of those fortifications as we move through the city. There are tons of extraordinary colonial buildings in the city itself, many of them built in the 14 to 1500s, the 1600s, all the way up through even to the 20th century. The influence from different styles and cultures can be seen throughout that colonial architecture. It includes Moorish, Spanish, Italian, Greek, and Roman influences. We'll see the Convento de Santa Clara, which was built begun in the 1600s and ended probably into the 18th century. It's a great example of early Spanish-influenced architecture. The hall inside looks like an inverted ship, and it shows the skill of some of the early craftsmen who worked in the city of Havana. We'll see the cathedral, which dominates the Plaza de la Catedral. It was completed in 1750 or so, and is probably the best example of Cuban Baroque. And we'll see from there a number of buildings at the scale from residential to monumental to civic to religious that really begins to give you a sense of what a city that has a half a century of history, more than 500 years, 5 centuries of history actually looks like.
Incredible, thank you. So day 3, the tour continues, and we're going to begin this day with the renowned Cuban architect and urban planner, and they're going to discuss the current state and then the future of Havana's architecture. Our group will then spend the rest of the day visiting Havana's 20th century architecture sites. So Marilys, can you tell us a little bit about the current state of Havana's architecture? What can we expect to learn?
Well, the current state of Havana's architecture, I suppose it's no secret that over the last 50, 60 years, in the years since the Revolution, there has been very little money expended in maintenance and upkeep. So part of what you'll see, sadly, will be many areas of the city that are in a sad need of of investment. I think that in the historic city, because Havana was designated a World Heritage Site, there has been actually substantial investment in the recreation and restoration and preservation of some of the really significant colonial architecture that I was describing earlier. But there's also a tremendous amount of building that took place in this world capital in the 20th century, especially in the years before the Revolution. And at the turn of the 20th century, in the beginning of the 1900s, along with Buenos Aires in Argentina, Havana was probably the grandest and most important city in Latin America. There was a boom period in these years, and it included the construction of a whole range of buildings with influence from all the international styles that were going on primarily in Europe. And those include Art Nouveau and Art Deco and a kind of interest in eclectic design and construction. Later on in that century, in the 1950s especially, La Habana became the center of mid-century modernism in the Americas, even in advance of the United States. And I hope that we will be able to visit several wonderful examples of that architecture as well. The building in the slide is the Edificio Bacardi, the Bacardi building. It was completed in 1930 by a Cuban firm, Rodriguez, Fernandez, and Jimenez. It's probably Havana's best example of Art Deco and certainly one of the city's grandest buildings. It was originally the home of the Bacardi Rum Company. At 12 stories, it was one of the tallest buildings in Havana and probably anywhere in Cuba. It was built by a German company, actually a construction company. And the story is that it took less than 1 year, 300 days, to get this thing up and going in 1930, which is no small feat. The characteristics of the terrain were challenging. It's on wood pilings, 500 of them. It was a reinforced concrete building at a time where there weren't very many of those anywhere, let alone in Cuba. And it became, up until the Lopez Serrano building in 32 took over, the tallest building on the island. There's a wonderful brick tower on the very top floor that has the emblem of the bat, which is the company's emblem, and it has a wonderful view of Old Havana. You get up there. It was renovated, the building, in 2001, so it's in fairly good shape, and it currently houses the offices of a number of Cuban and international companies. It's a beautiful, beautiful part of the city.
Excellent, thank you. On the next day of this tour, we'll be taking a tour of the Institute of Art, and this is a school that's considered one of the most outstanding architectural achievements of the Revolution. So what can you tell us about the structure?
So ISA, the Instituto Superior de Arte, or the National Art Schools, was an extraordinary achievement in a lot of different ways. As you know, probably, as I was saying earlier, since the 1st of January of '59, Havana's skyline hasn't changed very much. But in the years immediately after the Revolution, there was a lot of enthusiasm about finding an architectural language for all of the highest aspirations that the group of revolutionaries had and hoped to bring to the country. And the national schools are actually a great example of that. Construction began in 1961, so not long after the Revolution. It stopped in '65 before the building was complete, although parts of it are. It was the idea that's credited to Fidel Castro and Che Guevara, and it was a kind of monumental scheme that was intended to be an example of this sort of search for new formal language for artistic expression that was supposed to go hand in hand with the new language of politics and social order that the revolution was supposed to have brought about. It was designed by 3 people, one of them a Cuban, Ricardo Porro, and 2 Italians, Vittorio Garratti and Roberto Gottardi. And they were built on the grounds of a big country club in Havana. And it was intended in that process to transform this kind of emblem of wealth and privilege into a place that was supposed to be a tuition-free educational institute that was supposed to advance the highest and best in terms of cultural value in the country. They had three major principles for the design of this group of buildings. There was the hope and the desire to integrate the buildings into the wild and varied character of the landscape in this part of the exterior of the city. There was a real desire to use locally produced bricks and terracotta tiles. There was a U.S. embargo on Cuba, and therefore the locally produced bricks and tiles were much cheaper than any kind of imported materials such as steel and cement. And they also became an opportunity to show the craftsmanship and the artistry of the local workforce. And then they used the Catalan vault as the dominant architectural element, and you'll see that vault everywhere in the schools. It's a unique spatial formation, and the idea was that it would stand as a really kind of bold contradiction to all the geometric architecture that had been part of the buildings that we would have seen the day before, including the Deco, Bacardi, and then the more sort of angular 1950s and 1960s architecture that was everywhere around. 3 of the 5 schools are still incomplete, and they need urgent maintenance, but the 2 schools that were completed have been in continuous use since they were completed. In fact, ISA, the Institute of Arts, is probably home to some of the most extraordinary conservatories and the beginning of education for some of the most outstanding artists that the country has produced. Many of the people that come here to the college where I teach began their education there, and many of my colleagues really enjoy going there to share the work that they're doing. So it'll be a real treat to go and see this place.
Excellent, thank you. And on day 5 of the tour, after meeting with architecture professors and students, our group will visit the Ernest Hemingway home from what was his home from 1939 to 1960. We'll tour the property and we'll learn more about Hemingway's life before lunch in a nearby fishing village of Kohimar. Do you have, Marilys, any comments on this day or anything you'd like to touch on?
There's a lot. Well, there's going to be a lot to see. I think it'll be wonderful to have an opportunity to speak to people who are teaching architecture and studying architecture at an important moment for the built environment in Havana and in Cuba as a whole. The University of Havana was where my father studied architecture, I should say, and it's wonderful to climb up this hill of stairs to the top and see the water from there. But actually architecture in Cuba now is taught in a building that was built about the same time as the art schools, and it's a Polytechnic Institute not far away from here. It'd be wonderful to see how they are thinking about kind of pedagogy in architecture and what their aspirations and their vision is for the Havana of the future.
Excellent, Marilys. And sadly, that would bring us to the end of this tour, where we would be departing Havana on Wednesday, March 15th. Certainly, travelers of our group will be in for a treat having you as the architectural expert on this tour. And I want to thank you not only for being on the tour next year, but also taking the time today to give us a little bit of a preview of what we can expect to see. So thank you so much.
It's absolutely my pleasure. I think this is going to be an extraordinary journey.
So before we conclude today's webinar, I did want to touch briefly on the accommodations for our group. So we'll be staying at the Hotel Park Central, which is a 5-star luxury hotel located in the heart of Havana. This hotel is actually architecturally significant in its own right. It features 2 distinct buildings connected by an underground tunnel, a classic Spanish colonial structure, and a chic, sleek, modern tower that was finished in 2010. The website for the hotel is on the slide. You'll be receiving the PowerPoint from today's presentation, so please feel free to take a look, and there is an image of the Hotel Park Central on the slide as well. I'd like to invite you now to enter any questions that you have about the itinerary or what we discussed today in the chat function. You can also contact Architectural Adventures after today's webinar. If you have any questions about this or any other trip itineraries, you can contact us at 1-800-293-5725 or email at travel@architecturaladventures.org. You can also visit our website to sign up for updates at architecturaladventures.org, and we also have information about other 2017 trip itineraries that we have currently scheduled.